More specifically, the object I chose to elaborate on is Phyllis Wheatley's letters and poetry. I decided on her letters as the object because Phyllis is recognized for her hard work and passion. In her time, she was a young African-American woman slave. In her poetry, she wrote gracefully on events she experienced, religious views, and much more. A letter I wanted to focus on more than others is her letter to Miss Mary Wheatley. This letter was written on January 30th in 1771. I chose to do my project on Phyllis Wheatley's letter to Mary Wheatley. The reason I decided to do this specific letter is that it popped out to me the most. In the letter, Phyllis explains how she is degraded and told she would never be materialistic enough for marriage. I viewed that as if I were her in that time. In her time, slaves were unnoticed for anything besides being controlled by their owners. Phyllis wanted to be recognized more than that and overcome her time of just being recognized as just a slave. Her letters are a great representation of who Phyllis Wheatley is. She is a passionate African-American poet who intended to become noticed and not defined. Each of her letters is a little piece of her compiled into words for other individuals to understand her lifestyle. The role of the letters. In the age of Phyllis, her letters represent her life. She wrote sincerely about her passions, events she experienced, changes she went through, and much more. Each note she wrote went to a specific individual that is involved in her life. For example, she wrote many letters to John Peters, Susanna Wheatley, and Mary Wheatley Lathrop. Phyllis's writing gave her the possibility to escape slavery. In this slide, I included an actual copy of one of Phyllis's notes written by her. As she is a religious person, she goes in depth on the topic of atheism in her letter. I thought providing one of her real letters would be beneficial in this project. It shows how elegant she wrote and how passionate she is while writing. The letter's impact outside the text. Phyllis Wheatley is known as the first African-American author of a book of poetry. As we reflect on her time as a slave, we realize the hardship she faced. Her most immense problem was having someone approve of her poetry and begin her journey to escape slavery. Her poetry is significantly influential. The letters and poems reflected symbolism for young African-American women. Phyllis Wheatley has been an influencer for African-American women for generations. She wrote with a sense of grace and passion for others to compile her thoughts and feelings. As well as her impact on young African Americans, she also spoke volumes on other topics, such as religion, as I just mentioned in the last slide. Your mother has explained the stain of Eve, but tells me, as a slave girl, marriage is not for me, that I should be glad that particular chain has passed me by. I should focus on the Lord for my plight. I pulled this quote from a passage from her letter that she wrote to Miss Mary Wheatley. In the passage, she mentions religion, which played an essential aspect in her life. In an article from the National Women's History Museum, they also stated how her writing on religion led Protestants in America and England to enjoy her work as well. Connections inside and outside of the text. Inside and outside of the text, there are a variety of connections. The most crucial link I would like to go in depth on is realism. Phyllis wrote out of pure honesty about her events in her life and her thoughts. While reading her letters and poetry, we see realistic standpoints. The standpoints would include real religious views, ideas on slavery and escaping slavery, and her writing's idealism. The connections between the inside of the text and the outside of the text are very relatable. Due to her book being so powerful, individuals recognize and acknowledge the beauty of her writing and her character. Her writing teaches us that we should push for the things we determine to gain and to have remembrance of who we are as individuals. We see Phyllis Wheatley as a strong and determined African American woman. She wants her readers to recognize the trials and tribulations she went through to become that honorary figure for us. As another representation of the object we have chosen, I decided to recreate Phyllis's letter to Miss Mary. I am a semi-good artist, and my cursive is pretty well, so I used it to my advantage. I tried my best to write the letter as if it were her handwriting. Phyllis also used a feather quill and ink to write, therefore I incorporated a feather pen sketch to represent how she wrote. Overall, I admire Phyllis for her determination and intelligence. It is vital to recognize historical figures for the accomplishments they have made for themselves and others. Her actions are a representation to never give up on something you are striving towards. Although it may be challenging a lot of the time, the outcome can be a fantastic thing that turns your whole life around. As we see, Phyllis Wheatley did this for herself and became a well-recognized African American author. Lastly, I have my works cited included, and I would like to thank you for watching and listening to my presentation.